Alright, so if you've seen any content from me, my name is Evan Strong, and I make videos like this geared primarily around the lacing of our shoes, the tying of our shoes, and the things within the clothing that we wear in modern 2024. Today's actually the 11th of September, 2024. And there's a lot of things within modern designed clothing, such as materials and tags and cuts that are just a lot different, that pull our bodies out of their natural alignment and function and center line and balance and all the things that it would just naturally do. And I'm going to get into quite a bit of why that is in this video. Prerequisites that I always say that I do personally just to allow the body to have a chance to function normally within modern clothing are to lace your shoes with my technique. You can find that within my content, wherever my content is placed, in multiple places within there. And that includes tying your shoes evenly over and toward the inside, like that, to reinforce internal rotation and traveling up the entire body. So, if, in addition to that, another prerequisite, remove the tags stemming from the tongues of your shoes up through the entirety of everything that you place on your body. So, the thing is, people have been wearing clothing for a very long time, and clothing has looked pretty similar for quite a long time. So, it might be kind of a wondering, if people even ever hear about what I do, of why is it different now? Why is what you're saying important when people have always been wearing clothing? Well, materials like polyester, which is one of the most common materials to be blended in with clothing nowadays, and a lot of clothing is made out of 100% polyester nowadays. It's just oil that they turn into plastic. Just like a water bottle that we drink water out of is actually just oil that has been turned into plastic. And placing that directly on our bodies affects our bodies, as you could imagine once you think about what it really is. So that's a big thing, is the materials. Now, polyester didn't get invented until somewhere after the 1900s, like mid-1900s, 1950s maybe, right? Somewhere in there. It didn't start being commonly used in clothing until late 1900s, like closer to the year 2000, right? So I'm 25 years old currently, and I didn't live a few decades ago when basically everything was made out of 100% cotton or 100% natural materials. They invented blends within materials to reduce wrinkles. Because if you have a shirt that's made out of 100% cotton, or pants, both of these things that I'm wearing here, shirt and pants, are 100% cotton. They just wrinkle. That's the nature of cotton. It tends to wrinkle. So when you blend this stretchier, giving kind of material in with the cotton, being polyester, that will give you a blend of materials that can relax and not wrinkle. And they came out with wrinkle-free clothing. So that seems good, right? Because then there's less work if you want your clothing to sit nice and flat without wrinkles in it, without having to iron it, without having to dry clean it and press it and do certain things in certain ways to get it to sit how you want and look how you might want it to look. But now you've placed oil on your body. And again, this is a new thing. It's just decades new. Only just a few decades ago they started actually doing this within clothing at all. So that's one big reason why it's so different nowadays, and why I even have a place to do what I do and to sit within clothing where I dwell within the functionality of the human body. Because before, there was so much less effect that the clothing had on humans because it was made out of natural materials. And with cotton, there's little stretch, very little stretch. Cotton can kind of shrink when you dry it or when it gets hot, but then it normally comes back to very similar to how it was. Unlike modern man-made materials that have a lot of stretch and give in them. And that's the appeal and why they did it. a lot of it's about perceived comfort. It seems comfortable to have something stretchy, when really I've gone into in great depth within my tens of hours of content on the relation between clothing and the human body. Free content that I've made, just verbal dialogue like this. I've gone into very, very great depth on how stretchy clothing actually very, very much alters the body's natural workings. And again, that's something that just couldn't have even happened before just a few decades ago, because that kind of clothing did not even exist ever before then. So that's a big thing. The materials that are actual clothing are either fully made up of, if it's 100% man-made fake materials, or if it's a blend of man-made fake materials with nature, like cotton. So that just alters the way that the body can work within it, because it's placed on you. And I've talked about how it doesn't have to be at all conscious, but sensory wise, your body is doing so much always. Breathing, pumping blood, blinking, it's healing itself, it's digesting, it's doing all the things. I'm balancing while I'm talking without having to try to think about balancing. Your body's doing so much without you telling it to, or without you being conscious of it. So when I'm talking about the effect of it, it does not have to be a conscious thing, but it's the sensory nervous system of your body, your sense of touch within all of your body against that clothing, and the reactions that it has toward unnatural stretching and unnatural materials that ideally we would just never have against us at all on our actual skin, and now we're placing them on clothing that's completely encapsulating our bodies, such as oil, right, which is polyester. So yeah, so that's a big one, is just the materials. And again, the reason why I can talk about things that I do, and the reason why it has the effect that it does, is just because it's new, right? It was never like this in the past, as in literally never. Just because these materials did not even exist. They're made by men. They are man-made fake materials. So there's that. And then also, tags within clothing is a fairly new thing. There weren't tags. I'm going to speak for the United States of America, that's where I currently live. Legally, tags placed within clothing to give information such as what the material is. A big part of that was when they started making man-made materials. And they had to somehow start to regulate and give information to any kind of consumer who's going to purchase clothing of what's in the clothing that they're placing on them. Because back when it was just almost always 100% cotton, you just knew, I'm going to put a shirt on and it's made out of cotton that grows out of the ground in the fields. But then once you're making materials chemically in a factory through heat and through very unnatural ways, and from very, very unnatural materials, and placing them on people's bodies who are purchasing the clothing that, in that case, that person has now made to produce publicly, they needed legally to tell people what was actually in the clothing they're wearing. So even just placing informational tags within clothing is quite new. Within the 1900s, right? 124 years ago, if we're talking about from today, that's what I mean by the 1900s. Within that time period, at least, that's entirely new. There was just no such thing as placing like verbal, like written wordage tags within clothing, giving information about it before that time. It wasn't a thing that people did. It wasn't necessary, and it didn't happen. So when I show, I've gone over the effect of tags within clothing so often within what I've spoken about, and when I show how just having something besides the actual clothing material itself within the clothing, between it and your body, how it just causes an unnatural gap. It's, when you think about it, it becomes obvious. Yes, it does. It causes an unnatural gap between where the tag's placed and the clothing. There will be space, right? If there's a tag on the side here. And I've gone over just placements of tags and what that does, each one of them, and So those things just, again, were not something that people even possibly had to deal with, because they were not something that was ever placed within clothing until this time period that I'm talking about. So another thing is the stitches of clothing. We do have t-shirts, and they look very similar to, again, I was mentioning, people have worn t-shirts for a very long time, but the cuts within clothing have changed because, again, speaking at least for the United States of America, where I currently live, the industrialization of everything and everything going into machinery rather than people actually making on a sewing machine by hand clothing. Now we have machinery automated and doing it, and it's faster in a lot of ways. It's more efficient to make a lot more in bulk quantity in a lot of ways, but quality control goes down. Even if those robots that are making the clothing are programmed to try to do it exactly the same every time, the human eye can pick out discrepancies the way that nothing else can, because robots are made by humans, right? It's like our God can see things that we can't see because we're made by him. It's a very similar kind of thing, right? So yeah, when we're wearing modern day clothing in 2024, they've both taken the material that it's made out of and the way that they make it through industrialization and machinery, and they've changed the approach so much to where it sits on the body different and it affects it differently than it ever has in history. So there's always been fashion as well, but fashionable clothing, when you watch fashion shows, if you do, I don't normally, when people walk down the runway though, I have seen enough to see this happen, you'll see a lot of times it's very hard for them to even move. And like a walk on a runway down, you know, they walk down and they turn around and come back. A lot of the reason for the way that they walk isn't just because, hey, we're showing off what we've created within the cuts of our clothing and stuff. A lot of that really is the clothing is causing their body to just work in an unnatural way. And so their walk alters through every item of clothing. And I have a trained eye now, just from what I understand within the clothing and the effect of the body, to where I can usually see just about what seams and what tags and what ways the shoes are and laced and tied. I can actually see, just people walking around, what's actually causing certain parts of their body to be in certain positions. And that's something anybody could gain the trained eye to see, but I've just gone into more depth than most people do within clothing. So yeah, so those are the reasons. Those are the reasons why it might seem kind of weird to some people, like, people have been wearing clothing for so long, Evan Strong, why are you focusing on it now in 2024 thinking you've made some breakthrough? It's not that I've made some breakthrough, it's that I am seeing what all the changes are within modern clothing and the things that I mentioned there, and they're having an insane effect on human life. And the degree to what that is just insane, and I've gone into it so much in depth already, again, within the content that is placed here. So yes, I understand that a lot of the things that I talk about might seem a little bit too nitpicky, but I do make the claims that are true, that we should not have to stretch unless something major happens. And we should not be working out just for the sake of working out to gain functionality, or exercise just to get in exercise to gain functionality. Our human bodies are universally designed, as I mentioned, in the image of our living God, who is Jesus Christ. And if you take a look at even movies that were filmed quite a few decades ago, or photos of family members or ancestors as far back as there were cameras, right? you will see people's bodies functioned better. People stood better, people had more dexterity even within their face and their hands, and people were sitting less. Things I've been over so often. People were out there doing manual labor, working so much more, and there was so much less random health problems that seem to be normal nowadays that aren't normal, but we're just accustomed to them in our generation. So when I talk about this stuff, I know it in depth, and I can explain it in depth to where it's undisputed. But if you don't have the information or the understanding of it, which most people wouldn't, I didn't until I started to really dive into it, then it kind of seems a little bit too simple of a fix. That's a big thing. How could I not have to exercise just by changing my clothing? Some people might think. Well, it's true, but again, if you're not going to try it for your own self at any point, any part, any place on this globe that is our Earth, then you can deny it all you want, but it is true. So if it will help you just to do the little prerequisites that I say that are free within the clothing you already have, and you're just denying it before you try, then you're just denying it before you try. Truth, right? Every human, any human could do these tests on themselves and find out that it is true. These are not some kind of claims that I'm coming up with. I'm shining light on the truth of what's happening within modern day designed clothing and the reasons why that is. So I feel like this gives an encapsulation of, hey, I understand that this sounds a little bit different than what most people are saying in 2024, but it is true, and you do not have to take my word for that. You can experiment for yourself, on yourself, with your own clothing, and you can find out the truth of it yourself. So I just have done that, and I want to be the vessel to shine light, because I'm just praying through everything and sharing and showing what I feel that I should as I get revelation through prayer. So, as I've mentioned, I am going to be designing minimal clothing made out of 100% natural materials, as they pretty much always used to be until very recent times. I'm going to design them out of the understanding and knowledge that I have about the natural body mechanics that we all have being universally designed. We have different sizes of bodies, heights and widths and shapes and weights, genders, male and female, yes, but within those, the structural skeletal system of our bodies, which I talk about, all the musculature of your body does is move and pivot your skeletal system, which is all universally designed within. So I can speak for people in that sense and because of those reasons. And when I do design clothing, you can trust that to the best of my ability, I've never designed clothing, so it's going to be new for me, but to the best of my ability, I will be designing clothing that actually allows the human body to function. And I have shown, again, within the videos that I've made, just the ability that I have naturally within my body and the functioning that I have, and I didn't before, and these are the reasons that I'm allowed to now. So, as I say when I talk about the clothing of mine that will be coming, clothing designed by Evan Strong, if you ever do purchase it, please only purchase it in a size that actually fits you, because that's the only reason that I am designing it, to allow it to sit at the hinge points of the body and the pivot points and where it needs to just allow the body to have its function. So, thank you. Stick around for clothing if you'd like to. You don't have to, but it's going to be so beneficial for myself to be able to wear, and everyone else also who has the opportunity to purchase it. Again, I'm going to use the word an immense level of understanding of the correlation between clothing, the materials and cuts and things within it, and the natural functioning and workings of the universally designed human body. So, thank you, and yeah, there's a little bit of context to what I always talk about and how it really is different now rather than in the past. Okay, thank you.